Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive, and I am here with a reader question from someone who has a question on dealing with a narcissistic mother. So she says she's 49 years old and she's asking, why am I afraid to confront my narcissistic mother? I'm just kind of reorganizing her question a little bit here. My family is going through it all too, but I feel like I'm the only one that's afraid to confront, and I don't understand why. So, and this is her situation. So, her narcissistic mother took out a home equity line of credit on her and her the reader's father's house, and gambled it all away. She says, "We now have to sell their house. She told my disabled father she doesn't want anything to do with him anymore after 50 years of marriage. He's now living with me, and I have to fix their financial mess and take over the bills, etc. She hasn't apologized for any of it and just cries because we have to sell the house. And I can't even bring myself to say, you can't spend money on cigarettes anymore, or you can't buy those little moo-moos anymore. Basically, you can't spend money on things that are not essential. Which we have all been telling her for years, so I should not be struggling to say such simple things now. I'm 49 and still afraid of my mother. Ugh. Or maybe I'm just exhausted from a lifetime with her. I've enabled and bailed her out for 20 years now. I realize I shouldn't have, but let their house go into foreclosure? No, I wouldn't let that happen to my father, who also enabled." Okay, so this is obviously a really painful and difficult situation, but as the reader is saying, this has been going on for a long time, right? This did not kind of happen out of the blue. There's been lots of other events where she's been bailing out her mom, she's been enabling her mom, and so she's asking, why is this happening? Like, why am I so afraid of my mom? I understand the question, but I think it's the wrong question to ask. Because when you're asking, why am I afraid? Why am I struggling? Why is it so hard? You're kind of looking for a reason that says it's normal for you to be afraid, it's normal for you to struggle, it's okay. Okay, and then what? Right? So it's kind of like asking for a kind of validation, like, does it make sense that I'm afraid? Yeah, of course it makes sense. If you have a narcissistic mother, of course it makes sense that that's exhausting and it's scary. But is understanding why exactly you feel afraid, is that going to fix it? Is that going to make things better? One of the things that happens in families where there's a narcissistic parent and then there's an enabling parent and then there's enabling children is that everyone is actually tiptoeing around the truth. And it's more than that. It's not just tiptoeing around the truth. It's tiptoeing around the feelings and the pain that's in there, right? So the mom is avoiding reality because she just does whatever the hell she wants. And then she lets other people clean up her mess. So she's not dealing with reality. She's not taking on the consequences of her actions. She's like, I just want to do this thing and I don't want to deal with that. And I'll just leave that up to other people. And unfortunately, those other people are right there and they are stepping up to the plate and they're saying, yes, we will take responsibility. We will fix this. We will make this better. So there's a disconnect between one person doing things that have negative consequences, but not having to deal with those negative consequences themselves. Right? And the writer says reader says in her email, that mom is just crying because she lost the house. So now she's in the victim position, right? She's like, oh, poor me. Why did this happen? It happened because she gambled away the money. It's not rocket science, okay? So this kind of, I do whatever the hell I want, and then when I don't get the results I want, I'm going to collapse and I'm going to cry and I'm going to refuse to solve the situation and I'm going to let other people clean up the mess. That's kind of what, from what I'm reading here, that's what the mom is doing, right? Then dad is enabling. Now, why do people enable? People enable because facing the reality is painful. If you're married to a narcissistic person who gambles away everything you've got and does these things that negatively affect everyone else, but then doesn't take responsibility, that's really painful to confront. Because if you really confront it, you have to ask, why am I with this person? Why am I afraid to leave them? Why don't I just pick up and leave? Why am I putting my kids through this? A lot of painful questions. So it's actually emotionally a lot easier just to kind of smooth things over and try to make the discomfort go away. So mom is not dealing with emotional discomfort because she just goes into like, I do whatever the hell I want, or poor me, victim mode. But she doesn't take responsibility. She doesn't do the hard work. Dad also doesn't do the hard work because he's just like, oh, how can we make this all feel better, right? Which is by not confronting and not actually dealing with the problem, but just trying to make it all go away, which means it perpetuates. And the daughter is also not willing to face the painful reality. The painful reality is when somebody doesn't take responsibility for their life, mom in this case, then bad things are going to happen. And those bad things are life's way of saying, hey, you fucked up. This doesn't work. This is not the way to go about things. But if there's then a bunch of people around who are willing to clean it up every time, then mom will never learn that lesson. Mom doesn't have to deal with reality. So everyone is colluding, right? But just me saying that everyone's colluding is not really helpful. I mean, what is really important to understand is that in families where this is going on, there is a collective, a tendency to avoid feelings. Avoid dealing with emotions because emotions are tough and emotions are potentially painful and they're hard to deal with. So everyone is finding ways to avoid feelings. And the person who wrote in, who asked me this question, is avoiding her feelings because she's up in her head. She's like, I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Trying to understand why is a very rational thing, right? It's the mind trying to step in and saying, maybe if I figure out the answer, everything will be okay. But in this case, it's just running away from feelings, running away from painful feelings. Now, she's also created an interesting dilemma because she's saying, I realize, I've enabled and bailed her out for 20 years now. I realize I shouldn't have, but let their house go into foreclosure? No, I wouldn't let that happen. So, she's writing in at kind of like the potentially a worst part of this whole process that's been going on for 20 years. But I can tell you that same reasoning is going to it's going to apply for smaller things too. It applies now and everyone would say, yes, of course we understand. You can't possibly. But the same reasoning would apply for smaller things that you could have said no to. Or even, here's the way this usually plays out. When something small happens, you tell yourself, oh, it's just a small thing. It's okay, I can fix it. When a big thing happens, you say, oh, I can't possibly let the other person live with the consequences, so I have to step in and fix it. So either way, you're stepping in all the time. One time you use one reason, the other time you use another reason. But the real thing you're avoiding by this is the fear and the pain and the anger and the rage and all the emotions that are buried underneath the caretaking role. That's really key. And that's a lot to unpack. So I don't have a quick tip for you in this video. I don't have a quick answer. I don't have a quick solution. This is something you really need to you need to decide for yourself, like, do I want to get out of this mess? Yes or no? And if you want to get out of this mess, you have to be willing to step into another mess, which is the mess of your feelings, the mess of your avoidance, the mess of a lot of things. And I understand that's not easy. I have a program that helps with that, Know to Narcissist, where we unpack all of this. We go through, okay, what are the limiting beliefs and patterns that have been holding you back? What's underneath it? What are the tough feelings you're dealing with? How do you deal with them? But what is really important too is having a reason why you want out of this mess. If you're just saying, I'm tired of fixing it all, but it's all I know, it's all I do, then the problem is when you're in the caretaking role, it also makes you feel strong and competent, right? You're the savior, they can't live without you, they need you, so it's kind of a confidence booster. When you let that go, when you decide to no longer step in and fix everything all the time, you are no longer the hero. So who are you then? Who is this person underneath the hero? Who is this person underneath the caretaker? What does she want? What does she do? What does she care about? Do you know what she cares about? Do you know what she wants? Because if you have no idea, you're never going to get out of this because you're not going to have a good enough reason to, right? Because your identity is all tied up with being the caretaker. So it's kind of like, if I stop caretaking people and saving them, who am I, right? So you got to start asking yourself, in an alternate reality where I didn't have to care for my parents in this way and didn't have to bail them out and save them every time, what would I be doing with my life? What would I care about? What would I focus my energy on? So start building that image of like, what would that be? And if you're just drawing a blank, or you're like, I don't want a different life, okay, but then this is going to keep happening, right? And then that's just your lot in life, and this is what it's going to be. If you want something different, you're going to have to start creating a different image of what your life could be. The reason being also that, well, first of all, it gives you a direction, but also it gives you a reason to say no to your parents. If you have nothing else to live for, if you don't have anything else that you're trying to create, if you don't feel and experience that your parents are constantly sabotaging your life, by taking up all this time, by creating all this drama, and you're like, oh, well, I don't really have anywhere else to be. I don't really have anywhere else to go. I don't have anything else I want to do. Then why would you say no to them? They're just people in need. Somebody needs to save them. You can go save them. At least that's what the brain says. It's like somebody needs to save them. But if suddenly there's this contrast between their drama that your mom is going to keep creating, she's always going to be the center of attention, because this is one of the ways to be the center of attention. Do whatever you want, upset people, and then when things go bad, be the victim, which is, again, being the center of attention. So she gets all this attention because of all this drama she's creating. She's having the time of her life, okay? So your mom doing all this stuff. If you have a different life you want to lead, if you are working on something, if you have dreams, if you are making other things happen, and you're working on that thing that you care about so much, and then your mom calls and it's like, oh, woe is me, bad things happen again. Then you suddenly have this dilemma, because you're like, wait, I was working on something really great, and now she's asking me to take away time from this thing I care about, and that I'm passionate about, and that matters to me, to spend it on their drama. Suddenly it's a very different trade-off. You have something else to live for. You have something else you care about that you want to spend time and energy on, right? Having that is really important, because if you don't have that and you're just kind of, doing nothing important, and then she calls and you're like, oh, I get to spring into action. I get to be the hero. Yay. Then a part of you might be really tired of it, but another part of you feels like, I'm living my destiny. I'm on purpose, right? So if you don't have a sense of purpose outside of saving your parents, you're doomed. Right? So in that case, start thinking about, what is something else that I would want for my life? And don't start telling me I'm too old. You're never too old. You might be too old to be like, I don't know, an Olympic athlete. Okay? But there's plenty of things you can still do. So when you have a sense of an alternative life for yourself, then suddenly saying no to your parents means saying yes to yourself, means saying yes to something concrete, right? It's suddenly you have to decide. You can't do both at the same time. And that's the kind of dilemma that's actually going to help. But it also requires that you're going to be dealing with difficult feelings. And caretaking and enabling is like the surest way to stay comfortable, to avoid the anger and the rage and the grief and the despair and all those difficult feelings. The guilt, the shame, the worthlessness, everything. When you start doing something differently, those feelings are going to come up. So you can just say to yourself, okay, I'm afraid of mom. But do I want to live like this the rest of my life? If not, maybe I need to learn to have a way to take steps in a new direction despite the fear. Right? Instead of trying to get rid of the fear entirely. Maybe I can figure it out and the fear will go away. Maybe I can find a way where I don't have to be scared anymore. No, weaning yourself off and leaving this toxic situation is always going to be scary, no matter what. Because you're making changes to your life in a big and dramatic way. You're going against your parents, which are, they are the prime authority in our lives. And even when you're an adult, you're still conditioned to respond to your parents like they are the authority, right? So it can kind of feel like going against God when you go against your parents. All that's going to come up. The only thing that really matters is you deciding, do I care enough about myself and my own life and a better version of my life? Do I care enough about that to deal with the fear and taking steps away anyway? Or am I just going to collapse and say, it's too uncomfortable, it's too hard, I don't know what I want to be, I don't know what I want to do. And then you can go around the cycle and complain about your mom, complain about your dad maybe. Like, they're so annoying, it's so exhausting. They just, look what they did now. Look what they did now. Like, look what mom did now. Look what I have to clean up. Look what I have to deal with. Right? Kind of righteousness. Like, you're the good one, they're the bad ones. But like you said, you've been enabling them. You've been choosing to play this game along with them. And there's always going to be a good reason to keep doing it. Either because the thing that they're dealing with is really big, so now the consequences are going to be really big, or the thing they're doing with is really small, so it doesn't cost you much to step in and save them. You're always going to have one of those, and you have both of those because you've been doing this for 20 years. So this is not about the house. This problem is not about the house. It's about that part of you that's like, I am not going to let this happen. Why not? I cannot stand by and let this happen. Why not? And I understand that asking that question now with the foreclosure is a really dramatic thing to ask. But this question applies for smaller things too. It applies every single time. It's not about how big or bad the situation is. It's that you've decided, I cannot let this happen. I cannot let this happen. I cannot let this happen. I cannot let them do this. I cannot let this hurt happen. But what happens is you start doing their homework. It's like the parents who say, oh, but I have to help my son with his homework because if I don't, he's going to get a bad grade and then he might not pass the year. And the teacher's like, well, yeah, duh, that's the point. Like, he's supposed to learn to do it himself. And if he doesn't do it himself, there's going to be consequences. And hopefully, from these consequences, he learns that if he doesn't put in the effort, he's not going to get what he wants. And if he doesn't care enough about moving on to the next grade, about passing his exams, then he's going to fail. He's going to be a dropout at some point. So with your mom, too, if your mom doesn't care enough about having her life in order, then it's going to be a mess. Right? But if there's a part of her that does care, then by taking away the consequences all the time, you're not allowing her to learn. And some people need to learn in tiny, kind ways, and other people need to learn by just slamming their head against a wall. And most of us, we're a mix. Sometimes we learn through little things, and we're like, oh, I learned something, I get it. And sometimes we learn because we can't keep being run over by a four-wheel drive. And we're like, well, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. And then it happens like the 10th time. And we're like, maybe I should stop obsessing about that it shouldn't happen and just deal with the reality that it does happen and just take that into account. Right? And that's the thing. That's what happens in a family where you've got narcissists and enablers and everyone is kind of spinning reality and turning it into fantasy. Right? Mom is living the fantasy that she can do whatever she wants and nothing bad is going to happen to her. And then something bad happens and she's like, oh, and then people step in and they save her. So she's proven right. She can do whatever she wants and people will bail her out. So she's got what she wants, right? The dad is wanting to believe something about mom that is not quite true, but it feels more comfortable. Well, she can't help it, or I don't know, or she's trying, or she means well, or there's just no other way, or whatever it is. But it's a story, it's a version of reality that makes him feel more comfortable with himself and with his life, right? It's also kind of running away from what's really going on. And then you as a daughter are spinning also this fantasy of, you know, I need to be the one who like saves everyone. I need to be the one who steps in. I need to be the savior to make sure that everything doesn't fall apart. And it's exhausting, but you keep choosing it. So this can go on forever. It's always going to feel scary to kind of step out of it. But I think instead of focusing on how much help your parents need, you need to turn around and look at maybe you need help too, because you've been doing this for 20 years and you haven't been able to break out, right? And I'm happy to help, but I don't have a quick tip. It takes saying, okay, I really want this to change. I really need this to change. I have a program, Know to Narcissists, right? Give you a lot of information, and we work one-on-one on breaking those deeper obligations, because that's what it is at some point. You've internalized all these obligations, all these rules by which you need to live. I have to do this, I have to do that, I'm not important, I have to help everyone. Their needs are more important than mine. All this kind of stuff. It's become internalized, and it's really hard to break out of it just by trying, right? Which is why I teach clients healing practices to actually break those commandments on a really deep level in your body, where your body is holding on to this stuff. It's like, this is what I learned as a kid. This is what I had to do to be safe. So it's a big deal. Your body's not just suddenly going to give it up. And when you try to go against it, there's going to be a lot of fear. But there's going to be less fear when you can break those commandments first. So you clear them out, and then you can take new action and realize, oh, I don't feel all this resistance. I don't feel all this fear. I don't feel all this guilt now. Because what your mom is doing, and your dad too, is like they're manipulating you because they know what you've been trained to do and to become, essentially. So they know which buttons to push. And they're always going to find that button that is going to make you just jump back in line, or like get back in line. Like, just like, okay, I just have to be there for them. So it's like this battle of control, right? Because you're an asset. And as long as you are bailing everyone out, your mom can do whatever she wants. So she's going to want you to keep bailing her out, because it means she's got the best of both worlds. She can do things that are not viable, that are not really possible, and she doesn't have to deal with the consequences, like a little kid. And she knows exactly how to manipulate you to push those buttons that will, make you come to her running, and trying really hard to resist that. Some people can do it, but I think it's not the smartest, most surefire way to do it, because it takes a lot of force. And when you're already exhausted, it's really hard to like gather up all this energy and strength to like push your way out. So what I teach clients is how to, like I said, how to break those requirements deep down, because your body's holding on to them. Your body has woven these rules into your into your fight or flight system. So it feels like it's a matter of survival. Like, I have to jump in, otherwise we will all die, something like that, right? Because when you're a little kid and you have irresponsible parents, you're looking around, you're like, what are they going to do next? You're like, for the survival of the family, I have to step in. But when you're older and you have your own life, you don't have to do that anymore. But you're still wired to respond as if you're a little kid. You're still going to do that same thing. But I want to add in here, because you also mentioned, let's see. Okay. She also says, I truly believe after reading all that I have from highly sensitive people that I am an empath. Okay, great. What are you doing about it? Because this is another thing I see, right? This is part of the why, right? If you're just looking for reasons why it makes sense that this is happening to you, that's not the same as like changing things. And some people don't really want the change. They just want to have a good reason why they can explain that it's not their fault and there's nothing they can do, and then they can just sit and just keep doing the same thing, right? And I find that super annoying, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone through the changes I've gone through in my life. Because I always think, okay, if you're suffering, what can be done about it, right? If you're an empath, that doesn't mean you have to keep bailing everyone out. It means there might be more going on underneath the surface that's making it harder, but there are things you can do about it, right? So when people come to me and they're like, well, but, or they mention like, but I'm an empath, and this is why I'm struggling. I'm like, oh, I'm right here. Like, I have a program for empaths to stop the struggle. I have a program for getting out of narcissistic relationships to stop the struggle. But you have to be the one who chooses. And if it's just about this kind of like mental hunger for endless answers, it's just a cop-out. It's your mind pretending that you're making progress. It's your mind saying, if I just get more answers, then everything will be better somehow. But that's not true. That is that fantasy that the whole family has grown up with, which is we decide in our head how we want life to be, and then we try to make it conform. That's what your mom's doing. That's what your dad is doing. That's what you are doing. It's like, this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be the way it is. This is not supposed to be going on. So I am going to force things to be the way I think they need to be. And you're all doing this. Your mom is doing this. She's like, even though like bad things have happened before when I did this thing, I think bad things shouldn't happen. I think I should be able to gamble away my money if I want to. It's my divine right. And then she gets into trouble, and then other people are like, oh no, we cannot allow her. We cannot allow for this to become a real problem. It needs to be fixed. Right? This problem is not allowed to be. This pain is not allowed to be. The situation is not allowed to be. Whereas any point along those 20 years, when you can let the pain be what it is without trying to fix it or change it or manipulate it or turn it into something else, that's when you get your feet back on the ground, and that's when you get your power back. But when you're trying to turn life into something it's not all the time, you lose power, and it's exhausting because you're fighting everything. You're fighting how your mom is. You're fighting how dad is. You're fighting how life is. It's exhausting, and you're not going to win, right? But everyone in the family is doing this, and that comes from being up here and not being connected to your feelings and not taking your feelings seriously. Because your feelings are constantly going to try to get you back on track and tell you what's going on. And if there's a lot of fear, then the fear is trying to tell you something. The fear might be trying to tell you, stop this madness. You're driving yourself into the ground. And that could be a very important message. But if all you're hearing is, ooh, I feel afraid and I don't like it, how do I get rid of the fear? You're never going to hear the message. So your body is trying to help you out. Your emotions are trying to help you out. Life is trying to help you out. Life is trying to show you this is what works, this is what doesn't. But in families with a lot of narcissism, everyone learns, stay up in your head. You decide what reality is going to be. And if it's not what you want, you just try to force it. Right? And that just doesn't work. But you can keep it up for a long time. Right? And especially when you've got all these colluders and enablers involved, you can keep it going. But you're all doing this together. So you have to be willing to burst that bubble of that idea that you have mental control over this. That if you just have another answer or you just have another insight, then now suddenly everything's going to be okay. You have to let that go. And like I said before, you have to, if you want out, you have to start looking at, what do I want for my life? What do I care about? What really matters to me? Apart from my family and their suffering and their bullshit. Okay? What is it that you want for yourself? Because otherwise you're never going to have a good enough reason to say no. It's always going to be, I wasn't really doing anything important anyway, so I guess I'll just go and bail you guys out. So those are my suggestions for you. And I know a lot of people are going to be upset about this video. They're going to be like, you don't understand, and the situation is really hard. And I know it's hard, but it's not going to get easier. It's just going to get worse, right? This house, it didn't start off like this 20 years ago. But after 20 years of all of this bullshit, this is where it's ended up. Now imagine how much worse things can get if this pattern continues. Because life doesn't care. Life doesn't care about giving you homework. Like, life is going to be like, hey, we're trying to show you how this works and what doesn't. And you guys just keep not listening. So we're just going to make the problem bigger, right? Your mom is going to make the problem bigger. Like, everyone is so entrenched in their positions that this can only get worse from here. So if you're thinking, this is something you can't back out of because this is too big, I can guarantee you it's going to get worse. And I'm not threatening you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want to get through to that part of your brain that thinks if you solve this, everything will be okay. You've known for 20 years it wasn't going to be okay. But you can get so wrapped up in the crisis of it and the fantasy of one day we're all going to be one big happy family that you lose sight of what's really happening, which is that this is a cascading of things getting worse. Because everyone keeps doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And you can't change them. You can't change your mom. You can't change your dad. You can only change you. But it requires getting out of your head into your body. And I'm happy to help, but not in a video like this. Because It requires two-way street conversation. You need to learn things, you need to practice things, you need to do things. I can't just like give you a video and be like, yo, just listen to this wonderful video, listen to the sound of my voice and you will be instantly enlightened. It's not how it works. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I know this is not easy to hear per se, but as the writer also said, because I always ask when people, so it was a like a request for an answer or a blog post or, and I always ask, like, why are you asking me and not someone else? And she said, therapists just validate. And my family's going through it all, but I feel like I'm the only one that's afraid to confront. And like I said, you're not the only one that's afraid to confront. Everyone is doing a little avoidance dance in their own way. But this part of like therapists just validate, yeah, but validation is also really nice because it's like, oh, that makes total sense, honey. Like, that must be so hard. How do you feel? And there are situations where I don't do that because I step back and I'm like, whoa, here's the bigger system of what's happening. And you're in here doing this little thing, but you're part of this bigger thing, this bigger constellation of reactions and actions and consequences. And you don't quite see it. You're just doing your little thing. You think that's going to help. But it's not going to help. It doesn't matter what you do. This thing is going to implode or explode worse than it has now. So any point is the perfect way out. Any point is the perfect way to say, okay, hold on a minute. What are the things that I need to do for me? And maybe even what are the things that I need to do for dad versus what are the things that I feel responsible for taking care of mom, but she's just going to make it worse anyway. Right? The interesting thing with financial problems is if you are given charge, that also gives you power. But you need to be willing to take that power. If you're like, I am in charge of fixing everything, but I'm going to let all these other people who fucked it up decide what they want, then you're disempowered. If you're saying, you guys have fucked this up, I am now in charge, that means you have lost your rights over your money. Mom, if you want anything, it has to go through me. And once a week, you can send me a list of the things you need, and I will decide for you which things I will buy for you. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's an option. When you've been given the purse strings, it means you have a lot of control and power. So there actually is a way out. There is a way to turn this into something else. But it means confronting a lot of your inner beliefs and inner emotions around this that you're currently trying to avoid. Like, how do I make it all go away? It's not going to go away. This shit is going to be with you until you go through it and you really, really deal with it emotionally and learn how to get out of all those patterns that have you looped in. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. Sometimes when I explain this stuff to people, they get really upset because suddenly all the emotions are coming up, all the emotions are coming out, right? So if this is happening for you, that's actually a good thing, right? I'm trying to get through your brain because your brain's like, no, we can make it all go away. We can make it all go better. And I'm like, guys, you are crashing. This has been going on wrong for so long. There is a way out, but not if you keep pretending everything will be fine. So have a think about that. If you're like, wow, that was a lot, you can just replay this video, listen to it again, take a little bit of time to let it sink in, listen to it again. There's a lot in here when you're willing to hear it. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.